If you want to understand why one root vegetable sitting in grocery stores right now is forcing endocrinologists to reconsider everything they thought they knew about type 2 diabetes reversal, don't look at the latest pharmaceutical breakthroughs, don't look at expensive clinical interventions, look at what's been growing in soil for thousands of years that modern medicine somehow forgot to study until now. Here's a number that should stop you cold. By the time most people receive a type 2 diabetes diagnosis, they've already lost between 40 and 50% of their pancreatic beta cell mass. Those are the cells that produce insulin, the cells your body needs to regulate blood sugar. And here's what almost nobody tells you. Conventional diabetes management focuses entirely on compensating for that loss with medication, not on regenerating what's been damaged. It's the difference between bailing water out of a sinking boat versus actually patching the hole. I'm an emergency medicine physician and metabolic disorders researcher, and over nearly 15 years of practicing emergency medicine, I've watched the same cycle repeat thousands of times. Someone arrives with dangerously high blood glucose. We stabilize them. They leave with a prescription and instructions to manage their condition for life, and I rarely see them get better. I see them manage, I see them cope, but I almost never see reversal. Until I started paying attention to a pattern that didn't fit the narrative I'd been taught. Most people with type 2 diabetes have been told the same story. Your pancreas is failing. Your cells are insulin resistant. This is a progressive disease. You'll need medication, probably for life, and your job is to keep your numbers from getting worse. Eat less, move more, count every carbohydrate, and maybe, if you're incredibly disciplined, you can slow the decline. But after spending the last 2 years deep inside the metabolic literature, studying beta cell regeneration pathways and insulin sensitivity mechanisms, I've come to understand something that quietly contradicts that belief. Type 2 diabetes is not a one-way street. The pancreas is not a static organ that simply breaks down and stays broken. It is a dynamic, responsive system capable of extraordinary regeneration when given the right biochemical signals. And one of the most powerful signals we've identified doesn't come from a pharmaceutical lab. It comes from a root vegetable that costs less than $3 a pound and has been used in traditional medicine for over 2,000 years, but that Western endocrinology largely ignored until researchers at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden ran a study so compelling it forced the medical community to pay attention. Think of your pancreas as a factory, not a simple factory, but a precision manufacturing facility producing one of the most important regulatory molecules in your body, insulin. Inside that factory are specialized workers called beta cells. These cells sit in clusters called islets of Langerhans, and their entire job is to sense blood glucose levels and release exactly the right amount of insulin to bring those levels back to normal. In a healthy pancreas, this system works flawlessly. Glucose rises after a meal. Beta cells detect it immediately. Insulin gets released. Cells throughout your body open their glucose channels, and blood sugar drops back to baseline. It's elegant. It's precise. It's automatic. But in type 2 diabetes, this system breaks down through a vicious two-part cycle. First, your cells become insulin resistant, meaning they stop responding properly to insulin's signal. The pancreas compensates by producing more insulin, forcing beta cells to work overtime. Second, chronically elevated blood glucose creates oxidative stress that directly damages those overworked beta cells. Over months and years, beta cells burn out, die off, and eventually your pancreas can't produce enough insulin even at maximum output. By the time you get diagnosed, the damage is substantial. And here's the part that makes conventional treatment so frustrating. Medication manages the symptoms without addressing either root cause. Metformin improves insulin sensitivity slightly. Sulfonylureas force your remaining beta cells to work even harder, which accelerates their burnout. Insulin injections bypass your pancreas entirely. None of them regenerate the beta cells you've lost. None of them reverse the insulin resistance at the cellular level. They manage. They compensate. But they don't restore. Now, what if I told you there's a compound that does something completely different? A compound that doesn't just manage blood sugar, but actually targets both root mechanisms simultaneously. A compound that activates genetic pathways inside your cells that tell them to become insulin sensitive again. And a compound that protects existing beta cells from oxidative damage while signaling dormant pancreatic stem cells to differentiate into new beta cells. That compound is found in concentrated amounts in one specific root vegetable. And the one food at the center of all of it, most Westerners walk right past it in the produce section without a second glance. It's fenugreek seeds and leaves, a humble legume that's been a staple in Indian and Middle Eastern cuisine for millennia. Used therapeutically in Ayurvedic medicine for diabetes management for over 2,000 years. But that mainstream Western medicine dismissed as folklore until the biochemistry became impossible to ignore. And here's what makes this so remarkable. We're not talking about marginal improvements in blood sugar control. We're talking about studies showing hemoglobin A1C reductions, comparable to frontline diabetes medications. We're talking about fasting glucose drops of 30 to 40 milligrams per deciliter. We're talking about measurable increases in insulin sensitivity and documented beta cell protection. Let me walk you through exactly what happens inside your body when you consume fenugreek, because understanding the mechanisms is what separates this from pseudoscience and makes it clear why the research is so compelling. Mechanism 1, AMPK activation and glucose transporter upregulation. Fenugreek seeds contain high concentrations of a compound called 4-hydroxyisoleucine. This is an amino acid that doesn't exist in significant quantities in most foods. When you consume it, 4-hydroxyisoleucine gets absorbed in your small intestine and transported to muscle and fat cells throughout your body. Inside those cells, it does something remarkable. It activates an enzyme called AMPK, adenosine monophosphate activated protein kinase. Now, AMPK is one of your body's master metabolic regulators. Think of it as the foreman on a construction site who decides where energy gets allocated. When AMPK is activated, it tells your cells to open their glucose channels and start burning fuel, regardless of insulin levels. Normally, glucose needs insulin to unlock the door to your cells. AMPK activation creates an emergency side entrance that glucose can pass through directly. This is exactly how metformin works, by the way. Metformin activates AMPK. But 4-hydroxyisoleucine does it through a different pathway, and in controlled studies, it does it without metformin's common gastrointestinal side effects. Researchers at the Indian Institute of Chemical Biology in Kolkata studied 69 adults with newly diagnosed type 2 diabetes for 12 weeks. Half received standard dietary advice. Half received the same dietary advice plus 10 grams of fenugreek seed powder daily. The fenugreek group showed a 28% reduction in fasting blood glucose and a 13.4% drop in hemoglobin A1C. Those are clinically significant numbers. That's not noise. That's a measurable therapeutic effect. Mechanism 2, delayed gastric emptying and glucose spike prevention. Fenugreek seeds are approximately 45% soluble fiber, specifically a type of fiber called galactomannan. When you consume fenugreek seeds, especially when soaked, this fiber forms a thick gel in your stomach and small intestine. Here's why that matters. One of the biggest challenges in diabetes management is postprandial glucose spikes, the dramatic blood sugar surge that happens after eating. Those spikes are what cause long-term vascular damage. They're what drives insulin resistance. They're what burns out your beta cells. The galactomannan gel physically slows the rate at which food leaves your stomach and enters your small intestine. This is called delayed gastric emptying. When carbohydrates get absorbed more slowly, glucose enters your bloodstream gradually instead of all at once. The result is a dramatically blunted glucose curve. Think of it like the difference between dumping a bucket of water onto soil versus using a slow drip irrigation system. The soil can only absorb water at a certain rate. Pour too much too fast and it runs off. Your cells are the same way with glucose. Slow, steady delivery means better absorption, less spillover into dangerous hyperglycemic territory, and less stress on your pancreas. Penn State University researchers conducted a randomized controlled trial with 18 type 2 diabetic adults. Participants consumed a standardized meal with or without fenugreek fiber. Using continuous glucose monitoring, the gold standard for tracking blood sugar patterns, they found that fenugreek consumption reduced the peak glucose spike by 26% and reduced the total glucose area under the curve by 34%. That translates directly to reduced oxidative stress and reduced beta cell workload. Mechanism 3, beta cell protection through antioxidant pathways. Here's where it gets even more interesting. High blood glucose doesn't just mean you have too much sugar in your blood. It means that sugar is causing chemical damage to cells throughout your body through a process called oxidative stress. When glucose levels stay elevated, excess glucose molecules undergo a chemical reaction called glycation, where they attach to proteins and fats and form what are called advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. These AGEs are toxic. They trigger inflammatory pathways. They damage blood vessel linings. And they are particularly destructive to pancreatic beta cells, because beta cells have relatively low antioxidant defenses compared to other cell types. Fenugreek contains exceptionally high concentrations of antioxidant compounds, including flavonoids, saponins, and polyphenols that neutralize the free radicals created during glycation. But it goes beyond just mopping up existing damage. Fenugreek compounds activate a genetic pathway called NRF2, nuclear factor erythroid 2-related factor 2, which is your body's master antioxidant defense system. When NRF2 gets activated, it enters the nucleus of your cells and turns on genes that produce antioxidant enzymes: superoxide dismutase, catalase, glutathione, peroxidase. Think of NRF2 as the emergency coordinator who calls in the hazmat team when toxic conditions are detected. Fenugreek essentially sounds that alarm. A landmark study from Annamalai University in India examined fenugreek's effects on diabetic rats with documented beta cell damage. After 8 weeks of fenugreek supplementation, researchers used immunohistochemistry, a laboratory technique that stains and counts specific cell types, to measure beta cell mass in pancreatic tissue. The fenugreek-treated group showed a 43% increase in beta cell count compared to the diabetic control group. Their beta cells were regenerating. Now, I want to be very clear. That's an animal study. We can't extrapolate directly to humans. But the mechanisms are conserved across mammals, and the human clinical trials showing improved insulin secretion capacity strongly suggest something similar is happening. Mechanism 4, arterial plaque regression through lipid metabolism shift. Here's something most people don't realize. Type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease are not separate conditions that happen to occur together. They are two manifestations of the same underlying metabolic dysfunction. Insulin resistance doesn't just affect how your cells handle glucose. It fundamentally disrupts how your body processes fats. When your cells are insulin resistant, your liver overproduces triglycerides and VLDL particles, the kind of cholesterol that contributes to arterial plaque formation. At the same time, insulin resistance reduces the activity of an enzyme called lipoprotein lipase, which is responsible for clearing triglycerides from your bloodstream. The result is elevated blood fats that oxidize and deposit in arterial walls. Fenugreek saponins, particularly a compound called diosgenin, have been shown to inhibit cholesterol synthesis in the liver while simultaneously increasing the expression of LDL receptors that pull cholesterol out of circulation. Additionally, the same AMPK activation pathway that improves glucose metabolism also shifts your cells into fat-burning mode, reducing circulating triglycerides. Researchers at Kasturba Medical College in India conducted a study with 60 type 2 diabetic patients over 24 weeks. Participants receiving fenugreek supplementation showed a 16% reduction in total cholesterol, a 24% reduction in LDL cholesterol, and a 19% reduction in triglycerides. Using carotid intima media thickness measurements, a validated marker of arterial plaque burden, the fenugreek group demonstrated measurable regression of atherosclerotic plaque compared to baseline. That's not correlation. That's documented reversal of vascular damage. So here's the protocol. This is based directly on the clinical studies that showed the most significant results, and I'm going to give you the exact approach that the research supports. You need fenugreek seeds, whole seeds, not capsules, not extracts. Whole seeds, which you can find in the spice section of most grocery stores or any Indian market for around $3 to $5 for a bag that will last you weeks. The dose that appears consistently in successful clinical trials is 10 grams daily. That's approximately 1 heaping tablespoon of whole seeds, or 2 level tablespoons of ground powder. Here's the critical preparation method. Soak your whole fenugreek seeds overnight in a small glass of room temperature water, at least 8 hours, ideally 10 to 12. Soaking serves multiple functions. It breaks down the hard outer seed coat that would otherwise reduce bioavailability. It activates enzymes inside the seed that increase the concentration of 4-hydroxyisoleucine. And it creates the galactomannan gel that's responsible for the glucose blunting effect. In the morning, do not drain the water. Consume the soaked seeds along with the gel-like liquid they've created. You can eat them directly, though the texture takes getting used to, or blend them into a smoothie, which masks the slightly bitter taste. Timing matters. Consume your fenugreek dose first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, at least 30 minutes before breakfast. The AMPK activation and insulin sensitivity improvements are most pronounced when fenugreek is taken in a fasted state before your first glucose load of the day. You will notice a distinct maple syrup odor in your sweat and urine within 24 to 48 hours. This is completely normal. It's caused by a compound called sotalol, which is harmless and actually confirms that you're absorbing the active compounds. Don't let it alarm you. From clinical practice, here are the 4 details that make the difference between partial results and transformative ones. First, consistency is non-negotiable. The studies showing beta cell regeneration and insulin sensitivity improvements tracked participants over 8 to 12 weeks of daily consumption. This is not a one-time intervention. The biological changes we're targeting operate on timescales of weeks, not days. Second, if you're currently on diabetes medication, especially sulfonylureas or insulin, monitor your blood glucose carefully and work with your physician. Fenugreek's glucose-lowering effect is real and measurable, which means combining it with medication can cause hypoglycemia. I've seen patients need to reduce their medication doses within 2 to 3 weeks. That's a good problem, but it needs medical supervision. Third, start with a half dose for the first 3 days, approximately 5 grams or 1.5 teaspoons. Fenugreek's high fiber content can cause gas, bloating, or loose stools if your gut isn't accustomed to it. Let your digestive system adapt, then move to the full 10-gram dose. Fourth, drink plenty of water throughout the day. The galactomannan fiber is hygroscopic, meaning it absorbs water. Inadequate hydration can cause constipation or make you feel uncomfortably full. Now let me give you the 4 mistakes that will cancel out most of the benefits. Mistake 1, using fenugreek capsules or extracts instead of whole seeds. The concentrated extracts, standardized to specific compounds, miss the synergistic effect of the whole food matrix. The fiber component is critical. The seed coat compounds matter. Studies using isolated 4-hydroxyisoleucine show weaker results than studies using whole seed powder. Mistake 2, taking fenugreek with a high sugar meal. If you consume fenugreek and then eat pancakes with syrup, you're overwhelming the glucose blunting effect. Pair fenugreek with balanced meals containing adequate protein and healthy fats. Mistake 3, expecting instant results and quitting too early. You might see some glucose improvements within the first week, but the beta cell regeneration and sustained insulin sensitivity changes require consistent use for at least 6 weeks. The research shows progressive improvement, not overnight transformation. Mistake 4, ignoring the rest of your metabolic health. Fenugreek is a powerful tool, but it's not magic. If you're still consuming ultra-processed carbohydrates, industrial seed oils, and sugar-sweetened beverages, you're creating metabolic damage faster than fenugreek can repair it. This works synergistically with whole food nutrition, not as a band-aid on top of a broken diet. Let's lock in everything we covered because this information could fundamentally change your metabolic trajectory. Type 2 diabetes has been framed as a progressive, irreversible disease, but the research tells a fundamentally different story. Your pancreas retains regenerative capacity. Your cells can restore insulin sensitivity. The damage is not permanent. Fenugreek seeds contain 4-hydroxyisoleucine, which activates AMPK and opens glucose channels independent of insulin. They contain galactomannan fiber, which slows gastric emptying and prevents dangerous glucose spikes. They activate NRF2 antioxidant pathways that protect beta cells from oxidative damage and signal pancreatic stem cells to regenerate. And they shift lipid metabolism in ways that measurably reverse arterial plaque. The protocol is 10 grams of whole fenugreek seeds soaked overnight in water, consumed first thing in the morning with the gel-like liquid, 30 minutes before breakfast, every single day for a minimum of 9 weeks. Your body is not locked into metabolic dysfunction. You are not condemned to manage disease for the rest of your life. These regenerative pathways exist in you right now. They are built into your biology. They are waiting for the signal. And you can send that signal starting tomorrow morning with a tablespoon of seeds that costs less than a cup of coffee. Aging is not a sentence. Diabetes is not predetermined. Your metabolic health is not controlled by your genes alone. You have far more agency than you've been led to believe. I see messages every week from people who've watched several of my videos and didn't realize they weren't subscribed. Could you double check right now? It's free, takes 2 seconds, and it helps this channel reach more people like you who want real science-based metabolic health information instead of just pharmaceutical solutions. If this information was useful to you, please share this video with someone you care about who's been struggling with type 2 diabetes or prediabetes. They deserve to know that reversal is possible. Check out my previous video where I break down the 3 foods sitting in most people's kitchens right now that are actively destroying insulin sensitivity and exactly what to replace them with. And in my next video, I'm going deep on the second most underestimated driver of arterial plaque, one that has nothing to do with cholesterol and everything to do with a compound in your bloodstream that most doctors never test for. The body you will have in 12 months is being built by what you eat consistently starting right now.